everybody, and welcome to my members-only video for this week with yours truly, Bill, the company's expert, and I'm having a great hair day today, this being the era where people are increasingly stuck indoors and it's not as easy to go out and get your hair did like might have been possible in the past. This is a product of that. But as a YouTuber, this could be my thing, okay? So you let me know. You let me know in the comments if I look idiotic or I look somewhat moderately idiotic like I feel. Anyway, listen, one of the things I wanted to do with my members-only video since the beginning, as advertised, was doing in-depth content. And actually, I don't need the little logo up for you guys. You've already joined my channel, but I apologize for that. I forgot to turn that off. Anyway, yes, in-depth content. So today is a little bit of an experiment. I wanted to share with you some topics that I consider a little more advanced than I usually put into my regular videos. Okay, and this is on the topic of HR. Okay, so a little bit more advanced HR concepts, and I thought you might find this interesting. Okay, so let's see, we could look at it like this. Okay, sort of like my commentary channel where you don't see my face, or we could do it like this. Maybe this is a little bit better. I've been told that for my other YouTube channel where I do commentary videos, people don't like the fact that you can't see my face, my beautiful shining face. How could you not? But it's an audio channel, really, so that kind of justifies it. But we'll try this for today. Okay, so here are some notes, whatever you want to call it. This is kind of what I figure I'd cover briefly today. Okay, and you might find this interesting. So one topic that's always been fascinating for me, and it has been relevant to my job, is the incentive structure for employees in an organization. Okay, this is one of the things that CEOs have to deal with. Okay, some people like to get into this more than others when they're in that job, but it's something that I wanted to get into it more when I was in the role, and I have an interest in it because if you're wanting to succeed in business, if you're wanting to run a business operation or create a business operation where you're going to rely on other people, you're not doing a startup, you're actually relying on employees to do pretty much all the work. This is the first thing you put in place. This is where everything starts. If you screw this up, it doesn't matter if you hire the most talented people ever in the world. It'll never work out because you can't get them to pull together and to want to do a good job and to want to solve the problems that you need solving. Okay, so we're talking about incentives, and I've also had the question before, Bill, what would you do if you had to turn a business around or you had to fix a business, which I've had to do a couple of times? What would you do? And I would say the first thing I would do is I'd come in and I'd look at the incentive structure for all employees. Okay, I'd see what types of behavior we're rewarding them for and what types of behavior we're not rewarding them for, and make sure that it aligns with what the owners of the company need, what the company needs to succeed. Okay, so let's just dive into this here. So poorly designed incentives may do the following. If you don't get this right, these are some of the effects that can happen. Okay, so the bottom line is that people will favor short-term goals over long-term, or short-term results over long-term results, which is bad. Okay, usually companies, the owners of companies or the shareholders usually are interested in long-term success. Okay, short-term success doesn't really do people much good unless you're sort of, unless you're like a publicly traded company and people can come in and buy shares and sell them like 5 minutes later. In private companies, you can't really do that, or you can't really do it nearly as easily. So people tend to want long-term success, okay? And this is something that benefits everybody. But what happens is if you don't get the incentive structure right, all people care about is themselves, is they put themselves before their own good, before the good of the organization, and that leads to all kinds of problems. Okay, if you're dealing with mergers and acquisitions, okay, there's some issues there. So you can lead to failures and mergers by biasing the selection and weakening accountability. So there's a bunch of reasons why if you're acquiring companies, you acquire a company because you think that you will get more capabilities. You'll be able to get a toehold in different markets and get into different businesses and things like this. And what'll happen is that you will acquire the company, and you'll find that the valuation of that company was overestimated. It's so much less valuable than what you thought originally. Okay, so that's one of the issues with it. And then what I've written here, career ladder. This basically means people looking out for themselves. So if you have ambitions to climb the corporate ladder, either because of an ego thing or because of you want more compensation or something like that, you're putting your needs ahead of the needs of your organization, and that results in different behaviors. Okay, you're going to do things that will pay off for you now in the short term, but could potentially be sabotaging the organization in the long term. Okay, and there's many, many examples of this happening. So this is why incentives are the thing that, in my opinion, you need to start with. Okay, if I'm doing a turnaround, apart from the accounting, the first thing I'm going to be looking at will be the incentive structure for all employees. Okay, now just to give you a summary here, what I'm basically recommending is two things here. Number one, like I've written, is that one would feature goal-based pay more heavily in the long-term incentive structure. Okay, so instead of focusing on things like bonuses, okay, which a lot of executives, that's kind of like the form of their compensation. They have other components to their compensation. You may get shares, you may get other things, perks and benefits, but bonuses are a sort of standard way of compensating executives, and executives will tend to do the things required to get their bonuses, to maximize their bonuses. Okay, so what I'm saying here basically is that you would set specific goals, okay, that would be more long term, and that's going to be what your bonus depends on. Okay, in a nutshell. Also, basing long term incentive pay on unit results with payouts in cash or corporate shares. Okay, so payouts in cash and corporate shares is pretty standard, but what I'm saying here is that you would base the compensation or a bonus on the results of their department or their business unit. Okay, so you would actually tie it to specific numbers, specific metrics or KPIs that you're looking at, or key performance indicators, and you would do it that way. There are many different ways of assessing bonuses. Usually bonuses are determined by somebody's boss or their boss's boss. So depending on how many levels your organization has, that's going to be done by either the executive management or the CEO and the owner if it's a smaller company, or it's going to be done by your immediate superior. So basically, this would be, instead of looking at, a lot of times, there's all kinds of, this topic is obfuscated behind a lot of, complicated processes to determine how much compensation somebody gets. But in reality, what happens is it's really determined by the, how a boss feels about their subordinate. Okay, it tends to boil down to that. And so what I'm advocating for is that you would tie it to actual metrics that are not subjective. They're based on the performance of that employee's area of responsibility. So they're main metrics, as opposed to secondary things and kind of trivial goals, and basically just how the supervisor feels about the employee, similar to doing a performance evaluation on an employee. Okay. Because performance evaluations, as I've said in my main videos, it's well known that they don't work. They don't work at all. They're almost worse than useless. A lot of organizations are the best we have, but they're woefully flawed. And when you extend that type of process up to the executives, you get really bad things happening in the organization. Okay. So that's what I'm going to talk about. If I do any more of these in the future, I'm going to be focusing on those because I find that's a very interesting topic. If you get those done correctly, then what you see is that your organization, for the most part, just kind of falls into place. Okay, people want to work, people work on the right things, people work hard, and things tend to get happening. As opposed to screwing this up, and no matter what you bring in after the fact, you could bring in policies, you could bring in rules, you could subcontract things. It's not really going to help you if you get this wrong. So that was kind of what I'm trying to say here. Also, you can tell I haven't really rehearsed this. I wrote these notes yesterday, and I'm coming back to them now. So I apologize if I'm not phrasing things as well as I could. Okay, some other miscellaneous points here. The system should use the self-interest of executives, okay, as a way to get the best performance for owners. Okay, this is my belief. This has been put forward in a lot of academic materials on this topic. It's not universally accepted, but I'm a big believer in this. Basically, people are looking out for themselves first. And as we go into the future, and you guys will know from my main videos on my channel, dealing with hiring and dealing with compensation and things like this, people look out for themselves. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was well known that a lot more employees had a different relationship with their employer. They had a bit more loyalty. Employers in general had a little bit more loyalty to their employees. They wouldn't lay them off at the drop of a hat and things like this. The world has changed since then. And what we're seeing now is that employment is simply a financial exchange. You do the job, I pay you cash, and that's our arrangement. So as a result, people are looking out for themselves. They're putting their own interests first before the interests of the organization. And rather than, first of all, being in denial about this, or rather than trying to forcibly change people's behavior, which you will never be able to do, successful organizations try and use this, okay? It's a win-win. You try and use people's self-interest to motivate them to do the right things, exhibit the right behaviors, and then the organization succeeds and the employee succeeds. It's a win-win. So I feel that these systems really need to be designed starting from that principle, okay? Especially when it comes to middle managers and upper managers, we really need to embrace this, okay? A lot of organizations don't. What they do is they regard their middle management as essentially, the frontline supervisors or line employees, like workers. And as a result, great things don't happen because where the rubber hits the road, things are not really working very well. And you don't have very motivated people. Okay, past returns are not a guarantee of future results. I've worked with a lot of organizations that don't seem to realize this. Okay, there are some exceptions to this. However, in a lot of industries, this is what holds up. Okay, you might have done something great in the past, but that's not enough to make you win today in the present. Okay, so a lot of people have to wake up and acknowledge this. And I know some large organizations that have a major cultural issue with this. So yeah, for them, this is if you can start by fixing this. Okay, next kind of point I had here, the constant demand of markets is not what have you done for me lately, but what will you do for me next? Okay, this is kind of a variation of that. A lot of people think that because they had a success many years ago, that sort of is enough to assure their business stays as strong today. Many years ago, over 10 years ago, I was a little bit caught up back in 2008 in the automotive industry and the implosion of the North American automotive industry. I was working for essentially a subdivision of General Motors at the time. And that situation was this principle in a nutshell. These companies had been innovators and world leaders like a generation ago, like 25 years ago plus. that's when companies like Ford and General Motors, were really, they were famous, and they were used as examples of innovative thinking and prosperity. But that was at least I'm being kind, it was a generation earlier. It was actually more than a generation earlier. Those companies had been resting on their laurels ever since, and they hadn't really moved forward. And so they still arrogantly felt that, oh yeah, we're GM, we're Ford, like, what do you mean we're not, the number one automotive company in the world? This arrogance, and that arrogance was put on display for the entire world back in 2008. That famous example of the three CEOs that were called to the office, as it were, when they had to go to, I believe it was Washington, D.C., to talk to the government, to discuss their bailout by the government. And the three CEOs of those companies, it was Ford, GM, and Chrysler, they flew there in their private jets. So they were coming to the government to say, we're bankrupt, we need your help, you need to bail us out. And they were flying in on their private jets to say, I'm bankrupt. It was a media circus at the time. I mean, these people couldn't see it. And this was the principle. This was the principle that was behind that, okay? So this is kind of a tenet of business, right? It's not, what have you done for, it's not, what have you done for me lately? What will you do for me next? That's all that matters, okay? Management teams, a lot of people that, if you have aspirations to climb the corporate ladder and be a manager or eventually be an executive or something, I mean, if you're in management, management is in the business of making decisions, okay? Everything you do when you start your day is a decision, right? Should I talk to this person now or should I not? Should I take this meeting or should I put it away? Should we execute plan A or should we do plan B? Everything you do, your entire day is a decision. And then other people will execute those decisions, okay? So you're in the decision business, and making good decisions is what you're there to do. We can see this in small business, where you have a lot of smaller business that has one principal owner, and that owner doesn't see it this way. They see it as I make the decision and then I do the work. And they tend to hoard all the important work. They tend to not delegate. They tend to keep control over everything because they can't trust any of their employees with anything really important. Okay, that's a common thing. Incidentally, governance, like corporate governance, the good definition of that, I think, is it's basically just the relationship between the shareholders, directors, and the management of a company or an organization. Okay, so that's really what it is. It's hard to make it more specific than that. A lot of people try to get a very specific definition of corporate governance. Okay, this is basically what it is, right? It's how you work and how you oversee things, and the dynamic that exists between the managers and the owners of an organization. Okay, it's not simply limited to things like the owners check up on the accounting, or they have some kind of presence or consultative presence in running the business. It's not limited to that. It's just the entire nature of the relationship you have. One thing that I advocate for is that if you're running an organization, okay, if you're the CEO or you're an owner-operator or you're an owner of a small business, okay, what a lot of people do is they tend to simply concern themselves with the direct reports, with the level immediately below them, okay? And they figure that the level below that, well, that's the purview of people up here, okay? I'm up here, I got a level below me, and then there's a level below that. And I'm not going to mess with the level below that. And that's a good sentiment. Your heart's in your right place. You don't want to undermine the authority of people here, but I feel that you need to be able to check up. You need to be aware of what's going on with the people in those middle management roles. You need to, because at the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road. And I'm a fan of, obviously not a Fortune 500 type CEO, but I'm a fan of the Fortune 500 CEOs that don't just sit on the top floor of some office building all day and they're removed from the actual work that their business does. I'm a fan of the ones that go down onto the shop floor, the factory floor, and they go look at the line workers, and they have that presence there. And if there's something that's going on that they just don't understand because it seems stupid on the face of it, they will question that. Okay? It's almost like the Bill Gates model of being a CEO. I'm a fan of that because at the end of the day, you have the authority to cut through a lot of issues in your organization if something is just dysfunctional. Okay? So anyway, so that's culminating in this. I wouldn't focus on necessarily the C-level if you were a CEO or an owner or the equivalent of a C-level. I would focus on the middle management level too. That's where stuff really happens. Okay? And then the bottom line is that all these people, okay, whether they're frontline supervisors, whether they're middle managers, executives, anything like that, you need to think of them as co-investors, okay, rather than functionaries. And by that, I'm talking about the incentive structure. They need to benefit if the organization as a whole benefits. They also need to benefit if their particular area of responsibility is doing well. Okay, they need to feel the reward system for doing good work. Okay, in whatever form that's going to take at whatever level, that needs to be assured. A lot of organizations simply do that at the very top level and then stop. And I think that's a mistake. I think the people going down need to have that incentive structure. I mean, if you're a very small company, even if you're doing something like a profit sharing plan, something like that, where say you have a company of 20 employees and you have a profit sharing plan so that a lot of the profit you make in that year goes into a pot and then that gets paid out to the workers, right? So everybody benefits if the organization is doing well. That's incredibly useful. There's all kinds of tax incentives to do that, but forgetting about that, it's just the right thing to do for a lot of businesses. And if you can amplify that with other compensation packages too, that would be, or components, that would be the right thing to do. And then finally, here at the bottom, okay, it does not depend on actions of your competitors or on market conditions that you cannot affect. Okay. This is business success I'm talking about. Rather, it's about getting better economic yield from business opportunities under all market conditions. Okay. So this is something that I think is useful for people if they're starting a business. Okay. It's one of those things that on the face of it, it seems really obvious. Okay. But actually, you would be so surprised how many people lose track of that simple principle. Okay. Let's go back to that again, okay? What I'm saying here is that basically, you have to set up a system, okay? You have to create a business unit, okay, that it's not dependent on super favorable market conditions, okay? It's not dependent on outside things, your competitors or anything like that. You have to set up something that is resilient and it's going to be able to be profitable regardless of market conditions. This is a big challenge, okay? But this is the problem that needs to be solved, okay? What a lot of people do, or a lot of businesses do, is they kind of come in when times are good. They start making money because it's a big pie. And the problem is, whatever industry you're in, whatever economy you're in, it's going to be cyclical. There's going to be ups and downs. To a degree, it's going to be like a boom bust kind of thing. And you can't just come in when it's the boom period and create a business that is entirely dependent on it being a boom period. Okay, you have to be resilient enough. You have to design the entire business so that while you're going through the bust cycle, it's still possible to prosper during that. Okay. As I say, this is a huge challenge. But if you think about this and you try to address it, you stand a much better chance of actually doing this than most organizations that are not even thinking like this. Okay? They don't put any thought to this whatsoever. And then as a result, economic conditions change, and then all of a sudden they're going bankrupt, you know? So anyway, so this is a random collection almost of business principles. It's loosely connected with incentive structures. It's demonstrating the primacy of HR in an organization, okay? If you don't have the right incentive structures for your employees to behave the way you want them to behave, work on the right problems, care about getting good results, care about doing things that will improve the business as a whole, not just their little piece of it. You know, if you get those behaviors with the right incentives, then you know, you're almost guaranteed to win, okay? If you screw this up, anything that comes afterwards doesn't matter, okay? You could be working with, you know, Albert Einstein, Elon Musk, Nikola Tesla, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. You could, you know, Jeff Bezos. These could be your employees, and you would still fail because these people are not pulling together. They don't care about the business. They only care about themselves. They're trying to do as little as work as possible and not get fired, but trying to get all the rewards they possibly can and stuff it in their pocket on their way out the door. You need to do this first. So anyway, this was an experiment. I'm not sure if anyone is still watching or anyone is still interested in this stuff, but let me know in the comments if you would like more of this or less of this. I'd like a way to do more advanced content, but I'm honestly no idea how to deliver it. I didn't want to just have the equivalent of a lecture because I'm sure that would turn people off. But let me know if you have any suggestions or any feedback on this. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being my members. You guys are awesome. We had a couple of new members this week, so that's great, including somebody that rejoined from 5 months ago. So thank you. I appreciate all your support. You guys are awesome. And I'm always listening to you guys first. So take care. Have yourselves a great week, and I'll see you on the next one.